last year, at the start of the consortium's work, I spent time in several rural Idaho districts trying to understand the leadership and political issues that local leaders faced. And I encountered the idea for the 4-day school week in some places that were actually doing it, others were thinking about it. Many times the reason for it was given as saving money, but some people were optimistic that it would be good, not bad, but there were also some clear dangers. And so I decided to do, I also heard that it was a broader national phenomenon, decided to look at it more nationally. And so this just distills what has been learned in many places. So I looked around in state reports from several states and in journals. There were actually dissertations. The first real academic piece about 4-day weeks in rural schools was done at Idaho State, but a lot's been done in other places since then. And those of you online should know that there's quite a good piece of work. It's basically a PowerPoint briefing online at the Department of Education, Idaho Department of Education, that puts a lot of facts behind this. This is putting together all the results of about 20 different studies. That it is a growing phenomenon. I'm not sure that the numbers I have for Idaho are correct today, but that's what the latest report. And there are something like 150 districts, many in Colorado, that are trying this. Almost all of the districts trying the 4-day week are rural and small. Almost all of them are going to it primarily because of budget considerations, and they're almost all districts with high transportation costs. One thing I saw, there are some districts that go to 4-day weeks only for a few months during the snowiest and hardest season, but most of the districts that go to 4-day weeks do it as their normal way of operation for the future. So it works in pretty simple ways. Students come to school 4 days a week. What day they're off varies. It's either the beginning of the week, middle, or the end. The teachers and administrators work 5 days. And that basically anyone who's on a long-term contract and a teacher contract, their pay and their time isn't cut. The students are supposed to do special assignments on the 5th day, and there is a real effort in a lot of places to enlist parents and nonprofits and churches to do some things for the kids on the 5th day, to handle some of the custody problems, and also to make sure students are working. The normal school day is about 90 minutes longer, and a lot of that is for more time in class, although there is some use of study halls in addition. The teachers are supposed to work the 5th day. It isn't clear to me whether they work a full day the 5th day or they reduce the length of the teacher 5th day by the extra 90 minutes in the other 4. But nominally, teachers are supposed to work full days on the 5th day. Districts really hope by doing this to save money. And they can only save money, of course, on people who don't have teacher contracts or administrator contracts. So these are usually some cuts in salaries for substitutes and custodians, and if librarians are not on teacher contracts, and service people. And in cold areas like Idaho, to cut heating costs and transportation costs. Now, some I've heard nationally and also locally is it's partly also a symbolic action. When there's problem persuading local taxpayers to raise the rates in order to maintain school spending, this is a sacrificial act that often can generate a positive political response locally. The financial benefits have proven to be much harder to get than most districts that it took on the 4-day week thought they would be. And the estimates, as you see, range from pretty low, practically nothing, to about 9%. And I have to say I'd like to know more about how those 9% are given, and we will try to find that out. The Education Commission of the state said the average savings is about 2.5% of the gross budget of the district. The reason that the savings are hard to find is that there's only about 20% of the whole budget available to find the savings from. After you've taken the fact that you own the buildings, you have to maintain them, you own the buses or lease them, all the equipment, and all the faculty and professional central office staff are fully paid as they were before. There's only about roughly 20% of the budget left. And furthermore, utility savings have been extremely elusive. For one thing, even if the buildings are not occupied on the fifth day, in cold country, they have to be kept at a fairly high temperature, and oftentimes the efforts to preserve kids' educational opportunities brings them back into the building under some other form. So ECS actually, in its big analysis, was pretty skeptical that the average district could really save any money for very long. There are other factors besides the one I talked about that push costs up instead of down. If there's overtime pay, or if by adding 90 minutes to the day the district feels it has to feed kids twice. And as I said before, if the schools stay open, the buildings are open and heated, it's very hard to save much money. And then there's a little political paranoia at work, which I think is important to remember. States have a way of, once you find a way to operate on less money, of requiring you to do that permanently. And so people are afraid that this is kind of a slippery slope. I'm going to talk about what the research has said. The research has said they're positive and they're negative. And the nice thing about it is that this is not just being mealy-mouthed. There are things that could make it positive and things that could make it negative. So basically in the 4-day weeks schools, most times students spend more minutes in class than they do in a 5-day week school because of the additional 90 minutes. It's claimed that student absenteeism is lower. I think that would be something I'd like to look into further. There certainly is more time in the day for individualization and enrichment, and the 5th day opens up lots of possibilities for internships, for online study, for project work, and so these could be beneficial to students. Now, the localities that have tried them have found that test scores can go any direction. Normally, they don't change very much, but they have gone up in some places. They have gone down in some places. One thing I would say is that it's a new enough phenomenon that not many people have very long-term results. And as a social scientist, I'm aware of the problems that are called the Hawthorne effect, which is in any organization you can get a spike in performance by changing something. It goes away after a while, but it can happen. And I'm not sure that anybody has shown a lasting positive effect on test scores or other outcomes. There certainly can be positive consequences for teachers, and I saw some in one Idaho district where the teachers spent a lot more time working together and analyzing what they were getting out of their instruction and where they weren't doing very well and what the options were and how to make my class complement your class, that were very productive for students. So that 5th day can be a powerful tool. It should be that if all the professional development and teacher collaboration is located into the 5th day, then teachers are not pulled out of class as often as they would be in the normal 5-day week. And one thing that emerges from the literature, for good or ill, is that 4-day week locales are very attractive to teachers, and I think that may be for 2 reasons. One, because it is a very good place to be a colleague if you're using the 5th day well, and the other because the 5th day can turn into a day off, which is not quite as positive. The other side, and this again just comes out of the literature, is the student consequences can be negative. And of course, you can have a locality, a district, where there are some students that are benefiting and some are not. A lot of people are very concerned about that 90-minute longer day for little kids and whether they will just bonk and be unable to get any benefit after the end of the normal school day. And then a lot of people are concerned about the kids, whatever they're supposed to do on Friday or Monday, not doing it. And one Oregon district that we looked at was very smart about putting their day off on Wednesday and having assignments that the students had to turn in on Thursday and that were closely monitored. And that was an interesting way to make sure that the students didn't do what all of us would do if we were students, which is to goof off on the fifth day. I guess some of the big negative consequences have to do with how much more leverage there is in a given day of school. So you have 20% fewer days of school. If you have the flu sweep through the district and people lose a week, you have sick teachers, you have other things that disrupt the school process. Per day lost, you lose a lot more in proportion. That's really, it really puts a bite on the question of how often can you have assemblies and trips and games and visits from people doing magic shows and freezing tennis balls and breaking them with a hammer, the things that we all love to do. But those, like absences and so on, can take a pretty big toll on instruction. Teacher absences, whether they're for illness or other purposes, can be much more harmful for the same reasons. And I already mentioned this on the last bullet. What we've seen is a lot of localities went into this with a real determination on the part of the superintendent and the senior staff and the leadership of the teachers that we're not going to slack. We're going to use this time, but all the pressures toward letting up the pressure on teachers on saying, well, you had to work 4 times 90 minutes more this week, so we'll only meet an hour on the fifth day. These things are hard to resist, and so it's a liability. Parents have lots of different reactions about this, and there have been places, where the intensity of instruction goes up, kids get more individualization, the fifth day is used really aggressively, that parents, especially college-bound, or parents who really aspire to college-bound futures for their kids, can be happy with it. But every piece of literature says over and over again, this happens in rural areas where people love to go hunting and fishing, and it just is very hard to keep that to keep the fifth day being used for that. And then, of course, there are, and so I meant to say that parents start taking their kids out of school for the fifth day. And some parents, especially of those with little kids, can really struggle to find daycare. In some places we've seen that churches and nonprofits have filled in, but there really is some cost shifting going on here. And then there are people that fear that the kids will goof off and get in trouble. There are plenty of good and bad districts. And I wish I could give you more case studies, and we hope to do that soon. But there's an Oregon district that's done a very good job of using Wednesdays as a day off, and I think can make a claim that it has a major net increase in instructional time and in student time on task. We found another Idaho district that was seriously rethinking its instructional program around the Common Core, used all that time in a way that really mattered to the teachers and the principal. Another Colorado district that organized via churches and other community groups activities, including trips to colleges and things that were really beneficial to kids on the fifth day. But Colorado, which is the place with the largest number of these, has also seen the bad side of outcomes where some districts lost money, didn't just not save it. Some had transitory gains. They got a little bump on the test score and it went back down, and that people are now concerned the fifth day is wasted. And the problem, of course, is that going back, taking away the community expectation of a day off to go hunting and teacher's time, you only work an hour on Friday, and all the things that can happen, taking that back can be pretty hard. So the stakes are high on getting it right. And we've seen districts that do it right, that we plan to use every minute. And but the hard part is that the determination on the part of teachers can erode. You could be all for it to start, but whether that lasts is a big question. It's really important that professional development time and other things, once moved to the fifth day, don't creep back in to the other days. And it's hard to resist that. Same is true with field trips. Games are a big problem, we normally, I know basketball is another story, but we normally have the football trips on Friday. If that's one of your 4 days, then that could be a pretty big encroachment. The other part that we see is that the superintendents in the districts that are doing this right are on it all the time. Their management of this process is their main job. And if they get called away from their job during the main part of the week, which can happen to them from the state or whatever, then there's a real loss to that. So the districts, I'm now on the fourth from the bottom bullet, but districts really need to ask the hard question about whether they're going to get the benefits financially, because you think about how big is the benefit for not paying the bus driver for half a day when you're already paying for the buses and the gas and everything else. So, and in fact, we hope to do some work that will help people, kind of a checklist and a tool to help people think this through. It's every district we talk to, there are some kids that thrive in this and other kids that are overwhelmed by the long day, or something's happening to them. This is especially a problem of kids who are struggling. That they're already, even if the kids are already trying in school, they're already finding it very hard. So it wears them out. So the idea that you kind of assume it's going to work for everybody, it's probably not true. There's a tremendous need to manage teacher absences, which is, at least in an urban district that I'm familiar with, that is the toughest thing to do. The only way you can do it is to make work exciting and everybody fired up. But teacher absences, people taking full advantage of all their sick time and the like, these have big effects. And ultimately, some districts have thought about agreeing with teachers to cut these things, to cut sick time, to cut leave time, cut personal leave, so that the expectations are during the 9-month school year, you're really on it. So there are a bunch of big questions. It's the best that we hope to get more evidence for you. We do think there's probably the best day to take off, because you can keep the kids at work and monitor their results on Thursday. Wednesdays are our hypothesis. I don't think the state should do a lot to restrict this decision-making and clear it, but there needs to be a lot of clarity about what districts need to consider before they do it. Any district that takes this on has to be able to say in 3 or 4 years, how will we know whether we did it right? Because you might not do it right. The biggest question of all, if you've got to make savings of 2% or 3%, are there ways to do that differently? And we think there are. That's a big ROCI initiative on improving the efficient use of resources in school districts. But if you think about it, to cut 20% of school days for 2.5% savings is not very attractive on the face of it. Can the state do something to increase districts' leverage when they deal with teachers in order to make sure they're on the job all the time? And finally, how can district leaders share with one another the lessons they learn? We'll be looking further about this and hope to tell you a lot more in about 6 months. And there will be a question on the feedback form that you get later today about, will those of you in districts that are either doing this or thinking about it, will you swear, cross your heart and swear that you'll let us call you and talk to you and learn from your experience? I think it's really important. Well, that's the end of my presentation. I'm very happy to take questions. If there's one in the room, I'll start with people in the room, and I'll go every other. Yes, sorry, can you introduce yourself so everybody knows?
I'm Albertson from the College of Southern Idaho. And we have a significant number of students who are from rural schools that we serve either online, blue credit, or otherwise. I just had I organized to do some numbers here. And so I'm wondering how we can tell community colleges, which in Idaho enroll about 50% of incoming freshmen, how we can participate in this dialogue. Do you have any sense of post-secondary participation in some of these initiatives?
I think it's very important that you do, and let's keep talking. It's clear that if there were really good dual credit opportunities or fifth day courses that people could take, I think it would be good for everybody. Now, unless you intend to do that for free, that also has financial implications. But that could end up being one of those cost neutral and academically beneficial things. I think that the people that I've talked to, which is a limited number, are really looking for the best enrichment they can get in those 5 days, and this would be a strong candidate. I'll take online.
How many of the districts in Idaho are actually requiring teachers to come in on Fridays?
I don't know the answer. Everyone I've talked to, but that's not anything like sufficient. I sure hope so. but there's you don't have. I don't have to draw you a picture about how hard it would be to hold the line on that. And if anybody wants to write to me and say you're dead wrong, everybody requires it, I'd love to know. My email address is bicycle, BICYCLE, at UW, University of Washington, .edu. Bicycle at UW.edu. And I'll take any form of information or denunciation on that topic. Boston.
I'm going to ask Norm if you would weigh in a little bit on Jeff's question about community college connections and how they get into the dialogue. Is there, when a district is looking at going to a 4-day, is there any formal process whereby they have to let people know, the state know? What's the process of going to actually this consideration of a 4-day? Do you know? Can you answer that one for us?
Well, I know that with my experience with transitioning from a 1 school week to a 4-day school week, there was a lot of discussion within the local community involving all the stakeholders locally, and then trying to get buy-in, look at the research, look at everything that best meets the needs of that community and that school district, and that's what's been used to make that determination when we transition to a 4-day school.
Jeff, a question for you, Jeff. Would you have a bunch of checklists and so on that you used in going through all that, all the issues you had to deal with? And,
a formal checklist?
Or, anything written down, or we just come and interview you?
You definitely come talk to me. I know there's another school district that is a neighboring district to us that just transitioned, that they went through an extensive process in regards to making that determination, had a number of community meetings before they made that final determination to transition to 4-day week. And we did it, I believe, 2.5 years ago as my school district made that transition. I was part of a 4-day school week in Oregon. We've been on a 4-day school week for over a decade, and we went through a large number of community conversations before we transitioned to that as well.
Well, it's hard to know because you took it as serious business, and it really is.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, you said that one of the attractors for a 4-day week is that it makes a district more desirable for teachers. Teachers coming in and looking for that.
Right.
Has there been any pushback and concern from teachers about going to a 4-day week?
Has there been any resistance on the part of teachers to going to a 4-day week? I haven't heard about that. One thing I can imagine is that it makes a very long day for teachers, and I'm sure that I expressed worried about kids bonking in the daytime, but teachers might as well. So there may be some about that. I think either it's popular for one of two reasons. One, because teachers see it as a way to increase their professional life on the 5th day, and the other is it's a way to get a day off. These don't go in the same direction. Yes.
I was board chairman at the Snake River School District when we went to a 4-day week. And we went through a lot of public meetings, took a lot of input from our teachers, our administrators, students. The other thing that we had comment on was there were students from the charter schools that surround us whose siblings went to traditional schools, and they wanted it so that they all had the same time off because the charter schools are 4-day week schools, a lot of them in our area. Yes, and so I know that those charter schools use their fifth day for professional development. The teachers are required to come in on that the fifth day.
Right.
Ours in our school district are not, but we have utilized it for some trainings on those Fridays.
So can everybody hear that comment?
No,
Okay. So just another comment about Snake River about the careful preparation, and that one of the reasons that the community liked it was there were already charter schools on a 4-day week, and parents were unhappy having one child in a 4-day school, another in a 5-day school, and just put them together. The charter schools liked the 4-day week because of the emphasis on professional development. And one comment I want to make about charter schools is that, of course, they're totally self-managed, and nobody in the state is going to tell them to come to Boise for professional development. And so they are a little more able to maintain the discipline of a 4-day week than a public school is, but it shouldn't be the reason you don't do it. But it's a factor. I want to take a question from the online and then ask a question back to the group.
There we go.
There's
Please feel free to ask questions.
There's a major snore coming across the line. I want to ask the two last questioners that how are you assessing it now? Are you really asking whether we should have done it or whether some things have started to erode? Are you confident they haven't? Yes.
Well, we had a different super. Okay, sure.
Yeah, come and stand here. People can see you. Tell them who you are, though. I don't know.
Okay. I'm State Representative Julian Overton. I'm from Bingham County, and I was the school board chair in the Snake River School District when we transitioned to a 4-day week. We had a different superintendent at the time, and our current superintendent, when he came on, didn't feel like there was a whole lot of savings going on. There was some, but his concern was student achievement, and over time, if you're on a 4-day week, the students lose almost a year of schooling, a good year of schooling, so they don't go for the 12 years, they go for less. And so that was a concern too. I felt like student achievement might be affected by a 4-day week. And our transition was very difficult for our teachers. I felt like they were kind of lost with that longer time, having kids in class for a longer time, especially at the high school because it extended our hours out at the high school for those classes. And so it was very difficult for them to do. But I have heard the comment that our teachers wouldn't go to a district that had a 5-day week now.
Interesting.
I know our parents love it. They would not go back to a 5-day week. They love the 4-day week. A lot of them do doctor's appointments on Fridays and plan their, other things, music lessons. So they're not doing them after school because it gets so late with the children after school. So they're doing a lot of that this Friday.
Thank you. That's very interesting. And as a sometime university teacher that has to teach 3-hour classes, they're a tremendous burden. It's exhausting. Mr. Fox? Yeah.
So they can hear you.
Yeah, this is good.
Thank you.
It's like I have a 40 week I can get away.
Okay, for us with the Marshall School District, and we're fairly new to this in regards to we're in our 3rd year of the 4-day transition, but we are constantly trying to monitor the progress. It's given us opportunities to provide other enrichment activities for our kids. We have College Fridays, so we have tutoring for our students, so they come in on those Fridays, and we're just trying to continue to monitor and track this as we go along. And so we're still trying to monitor it and see how that works out. But my experience in Oregon, it was a very positive aspect, and we want to continue with that as we move forward. And our student scores continue to stay steady or increase.
Thank you. Please. College Friday, what is that?
Basically, well, Well, for us, for a College Friday, what is a College Friday? Basically, that gives us an opportunity for kids to come in if they're working on dual credit classes or they need some extra assistance. We actually have a staff member who comes in on those Fridays. We use one Friday a month for professional development, and then those other Fridays we have a staff member there on site from 8 to noon, so that the kids can come in and receive extra assistance for that. So,
just one thing I wanted to mention that I forgot about, that Oregon district that took the Wednesday off, is that it greatly increased the amount of written work students got and the amount of feedback the teachers got on it. The students had writing assignments that were significant, research and writing assignments every Wednesday. On Thursday, those things got read and graded, so that there was not just something you threw in. And that had a big difference. Okay. Yes, please.
I know this is a relatively new trend that we're talking about here, but Oregon's been doing it for 10 years. Is there any correlation of students who are going to these 4-day work weeks that have an increase in higher education enrollment? I know we're talking a lot about test scores in high school, but is it promoting them to further their education at all? Is there any kind of data that has that correlation?
Is there any evidence about college going in 4-day week? I think the answer is there is no evidence. It could be anything. And I think we need to find that out. But everything I've seen is very short-term oriented. You know, what happens to test scores in the first couple of years? It's possible that there's a lot more college-relevant work being done in high schools in these years. I frankly am also very concerned about early grades, what happens to kids then, and whether that has a long-term effect. You know, if a lot of districts that have gone to 4-day week 4 years ago could learn something about their elementary students when they get to high school they don't know yet, and it could be good or bad. Online question.
Have you identified any differences in how 4-day weeks are implemented and what designs work better than others?
Are there differences in 4-day week implementation and what are the best designs? We know very little. We know that this Oregon midweek day off has big effects positively on instruction, but we're just starting to gather the evidence. The best thing that's available now is a bunch of summary work that's online, and I think that anybody contemplating that has to understand they're a pioneer. You know, and we'd like very much to work with people who have pioneered it, to give checklists and so on to people who are thinking about it, so that they know what pitfalls there are, what you have to negotiate. Frankly, a lot of it is what you have to negotiate with teachers, and how to make that stick over the long run. Boston.
Paul, my question really is around what credible evidence should a school district be collecting from both the operational and the student achievement side? What
evidence should a district be collecting on student achievement and operational? On the operational first, it takes some pretty sharp pencils to figure out the savings, and you have to be sure that there are two columns at least in the calculating the savings. One is, what are you not spending anymore? So there may be a custodian you're not paying for. There may be a meal you skipped. There may be some dozens of miles less that the buses are running, and that has, you can figure out the cost of that, shorter days for the bus drivers or whatever. But it's really important to register the cost of increase, and that could be, for example, that you actually increase the amount of hours you heat the buildings. If you're using the buildings 5 days a week, you could end up spending more on food. You spend more on, if you're hiring aides to come in on the 5th day, that could offset a lot of the things you save. And we'd like to help people think about all those options. But the one thing that is clear from the ECS work is a lot of the districts that went to the 4-day week to save money and then lost money never thought about the other side of the costs. They were focused on what they weren't going to do and didn't think about what they had to do instead, which ended up costing a lot of money. Yes? As I understand it, the states accept the weighted average daily attendance figures, so that's not affected people's income. One more question on why.
The KIPP school in New York City suggests a longer school day, 7:30 to 5, and 223 days of school a year helps struggling students do better in math and reading. Surely this would increase education costs. Shouldn't students, rather than budgets, be our main concern?
Well, there's an example of the KIPP school in New York that has a much longer day and much longer school year, and the argument is that students benefit a lot from both those things. And isn't this going the other direction, and should you worry about the results of the students? I think the answer is yes. It is true that one of the few things we see in the charter sector that consistently marks out schools that make a difference for kids is they spend longer time. So that doesn't mean that longer time is the only way you can get it, as we've discussed. But it does mean that if you have less time, you have a lot of challenges. And the one thing that the KIPP experience does, students do a lot of repetition, and they learn a lot of content in multiple ways, by not only being taught, but by doing stuff online, by doing problems, by doing discussion groups, which is the way everybody learns to a high level. But these are kids who would never have been getting that kind of learning before in a kind of a perfunctory regular high school. So it makes a big difference for them. And one of the big concerns that people have expressed about the 4-day week is it may be very good for a lot of kids for all the reasons we talked about, but the kids who need that repetition and the like may really suffer. And in localities, for example, at Idaho, that have brand new big resident Hispanic populations that are a new educational challenge, there are a lot of challenges associated with that, mainly about finding teachers. But adding the transition to a 4-day week into the effort to adapt to that challenge would be quite a trick. Thank you so much. Blossom is going to. Oh, we have 2 more questions. Let's get them. Yeah.
What are some examples of strong incentives to minimize teacher absences?
What are examples of strong incentives to minimize teacher absences? Well, one thing is to be upfront about it and get people to agree that they will minimize their absences. And I think that will work with the group of teachers with whom the deal was first struck. As time goes on and you've got a new bunch that weren't there as the founding mothers and fathers, they might feel differently about it. There probably are some financial incentives, which of course could even be beneficial for a lot of reasons. Marguerite Rosa has suggested that the district offered to buy back teachers' discretionary leave time at a rate of about 50 cents on the dollar. So if you don't take your day off, we'll pay you for half a day. Now, that's not a way to save money, but it may be a way to increase teacher presence in the school. But I do think in the districts we've seen, the main mechanism is peer pressure. Teachers say, this is good for the kids, it's good for us, it's good for the district, we have to do it, let's do it. But, then for superintendents and others, they have to realize that determination will erode. You have to revisit it a lot.
One last one here. Does this schedule work better for certain age groups of students, high school versus elementary?
Does this school work better for high school students than for elementary students? I don't think anybody has done a really good outcomes comparison, but most of the lore from educators is that it is a real problem for little kids. It may be even by 6th grade that the longer days are okay, but there really is a widespread concern that at early elementary that's difficult. And of course, the other part is that the custodial demands of little kids are much greater than they are for big kids. If you can get them motivated to go to a place and connect to an online college course or something, you don't have to watch them all the time. They're not going to fall down and cut themselves. Yes, please, by all means.
One cost savings that we ended up having in our school district was the cost of substitutes, because our teachers came during that 4-week day. They came, taught their classes. So one of our savings that we did not realize would happen was the cost that we were spending on substitute teachers.
If people didn't hear that, it's very important. In Snake River, big financial benefit was to save on the cost of substitutes because teachers came more often than need substitutes. And more generally, the use of substitutes is one of the big cost drivers in public education. And charter schools, which don't have a substitute pool out there they can tap, they only have so much money, and the pressure on their teachers to come every day is pretty strong. One thing, I've even seen this in parochial schools, that they don't have a substitute pool. There's no money for it. So if you're too sick to come in, you've got Ebola, you better stay home. Okay. But if you're able to come in, you better, because if you don't come in, the principal takes your class. We put two classes together. Somebody's going to bear the burden of that. The substitute pool mechanism in public education lets that burden be externalized. Only the kids pay for that. It's not so good.
Paul, before we wrap up, I just was going to ask you a couple of questions and let people know that the webinar will be archived on the ROCIidaho.org website, and as well as your PowerPoint, and that there's a bibliography out there. Do you want to say anything about the bibliography out on ROCIidaho.org?
There is if you look on ROCIidaho.org, there is a bibliography, and it's not complete yet because I dug up a lot of stuff, and I'll put those on. Almost all the good material on 4-Day Week is accessible online. A few things are in journals, hard to get, but the best stuff from ECS and the state of Colorado, terrific stuff, and a very good PowerPoint from Idaho. Those are easy to get. We can give you all the links.
And do you want to talk at all about the ROCI work that is going to be coming out in book form?
Yeah, well, we've got ROCI is a group of 9 academics mainly, but some real policy and education people who are working in rural areas and trying to open up new subjects. For example, the subject of why some rural districts get very high return on investment, and the other subject of how districts whose population has changed dramatically can cope with the change. So we're into both the combination of policy and practical issues. The papers from our first year, which were all on K-12 issues, are coming out now on the ROCI website. We'll put our second paper out next week, and there'll be one every 2 or 3 weeks from now till early in the year. And we're starting, we're midway in a whole bunch of new work, a little bit on K-12, but much of it now on college access issues, on everything from how rural kids get information about colleges and how teachers get information about it, whether the curriculum in some rural districts is getting discounted by the colleges as admission evidence, good options on the use of dual credit. Kay McClenny, who's in the audience today, newly recruited to work on community college-based access issues. And in the probably in the mid-spring, those will start to come out, and we will make sure that everybody on this seminar list is on the email list so you'll know exactly when they come out and how to get to them.
Great. And then last but not least, we have a survey, 2 to 3 questions that will be sent to everyone. We would greatly appreciate your feedback on that so we know how we can improve and maybe the next research from the ROCI Task Force. And on behalf of the J.A. and Kathryn Albertson Foundation, we want to thank you for being part of this webinar, and thank you to Dr. Paul Hill here, who is the chair of the ROCI Task Force, for providing the information on the 4-day school week. So if there are no other questions, we'll sign off.
Can I say one more thing? Anybody who wants to bend my ear, all you have to do is respond to this questionnaire, and I or my brilliant research assistant who's better than I am